You see, Ms. Lake, we have both been public figures in Arizona for a long time. I've seen you in action, including your behavior in the last 2 elections. And let me be clear about something. The American people cannot believe a word you say.
It saddens me that you are from Arizona and you're okay with
That's a yes or no question, Ms. Lake.
It saddens me that you are from Arizona.
I guess the answer is no, reclaiming my time.
The gentleman will suspend, will stop the clock.
I was brave enough to fight our shoddy elections, and the courts have not caught up.
That was a yes or no question. I guess the answer is no. Let me reclaim my time.
I wish I could yield back the last 5 minutes of my life, actually. And I want to apologize to the people of Arizona that we have somebody who's representing the folks in one of our great parts of the Valley that doesn't care about the integrity of our election. So I remember the stories about you where they said you had a gay lover.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First, the channel where we tell you the truth that the mainstream media won't. If you're new here, make sure to hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and ring the notification bell because we're bringing you the real news every single day. And hey, if you want to support our mission of putting America first, head over to patreon.com/AmericaFirst where you can support us for as low as $5 a month. Every dollar helps us continue fighting for the truth and exposing the deep state swamp creatures who want to destroy our great nation. Today we're going to be breaking down this absolutely ridiculous congressional hearing where Representative Greg Stanton from Arizona tried to ambush Kari Lake during her confirmation hearing. Now, before we dive deep into the circus, let me be clear about something. What we witnessed here wasn't a legitimate oversight hearing. This was a political hit job, plain and simple. The Democrats and their rhino allies are terrified of strong conservative voices like Kari Lake taking control of our international broadcasting services, and they'll do anything to stop her.
Mr. Stanton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lake, your actions as senior advisor are eroding American soft power around the globe. We should not be dismantling the agency that combats propaganda from the Chinese Communist Party, the Kremlin, and Tehran. Especially now, we need to be able to broadcast facts that counter Iranian state-run media spin that is essential to America's long-term interests. Your job is to tell the people of the world the truth about America. And because of that, there's a more fundamental issue I want to address today, and that is character. You see, Ms. Lake, we have both been public figures in Arizona for a long time. I've seen you in action, including your behavior in the last 2 elections. And let me be clear about something. The American people cannot believe a word you say. You ran for governor in Arizona in 2022. You lost fair and square. Instead of conceding, you embarrassed yourself and our state by lying again and again for years, blaming everything under the sun for your loss except for your own toxic politics. You lie about that election to this very day. You lied about signatures on mail-in ballots not matching those on file. Proven wrong. You lied about ballots being intentionally misprinted and then rejected in Republican areas. Total BS. You lied and said hundreds of thousands of ballots were mishandled. Zero evidence. You claimed fake ballots were snuck into batches before they were counted. Come on. You repeated these lies again and again, and you've said even recently, quote, I am the duly elected governor, they just stole it, unquote. Give me a break. Ms. Lake, your new role requires you to tell the truth. For decades, whenever authoritarians and dictators suppressed the people and claimed victory in fraudulent elections, Voice of America countered those lies. I can't imagine how people fighting for democracy today and around the world can trust someone who has so shamelessly lied about her own election.
Will the gentleman yield to the question?
Lake, no, I will not.
Okay,
Ms.
well,
Lake,
just so you know,
to regain a semblance of your credibility, I will not yield.
So
Ms. Lake, to regain a semblance of your credibility.
Factual about the evidence.
The gentleman's time, if you did not yield.
I did not yield, and I'd like the time back. Ms. Lake, to regain a semblance of your credibility, are you finally ready to admit you lost the 2022 Arizona election?
It saddens me that you are from Arizona and you're okay with
That's
the
a
way
yes or no question, Ms. Lake.
It saddens me that you are from Arizona.
I guess the answer is no. Reclaiming my time.
The gentleman will suspend, will stop the clock. For all present, members are reminded to avoid engaging in personality toward the president and other members. Okay, and this is a member of the administration, so I would caution all to stay on the subjects and stay off of personalities,
Would love to.
please. Gentleman may continue.
Yes, and in this case, these are adjudicated lies. Courts of law have determined that these are lies. These are not me saying it. You didn't
Wow,
just
and the
lie to
courts-
the
the
press.
courts are really awesome
You took
right
those
now.
lies to court and lost again and again. Every one of your lawsuits failed. And a federal judge said that you were furthering false narratives that blamelessly undermine public trust. And you didn't just lie. You were formally sanctioned by the court. Ms. Lake, you have been sanctioned twice for providing false information to courts. Isn't that true? Yes or no?
I was brave enough to fight our shoddy elections, and the courts have not caught up.
That was a yes or no. I guess the answer is no. Let me reclaim my time. You have been sanctioned by both the United States District Court and the Arizona Supreme Court for, quote, making false factual statements to the court. And you were sued for defamation by a Republican election official, Stephen Richer. He and his family were subjected to harassment and even death threats because of those lies. You told your supporters, Richer and fellow Republican County Supervisor Bill Gates, that they, quote, sabotaged Election Day. You accused them of deliberately printing the wrong image on ballots to jam tabulators and injecting hundreds of thousands of phony ballots. What a joke. And here's the thing, Ms. Lake. When it came down to it, you chickened out. You refused to defend those lies in court. You decided to take a default judgment. You are an adjudicated liar and a two-time political
Chairman, I move to
loser
take down
in
those
Arizona.
those
I have
words,
one
please.
final question.
Chairman,
Reclaiming my time.
I'd like
I
to
have one
take
final
down
question.
those
I'm not gonna
words.
yield.
It's the
He's gotta get his
gentleman's
fundraising
3
video.
seconds.
I have one final question
Get your
for you,
fundraising.
call
Ms.
someone a
Lake. You have
liar.
a chance
That's
to
not
answer.
how
Let me
you
one
treat
final
other
question.
people that
The
are being
gentlelady
questioned.
will suspend, please. Go ahead, you may
You
continue.
lost for governor in 2022 to Katie Hobbs. You lost even worse to Ruben Gallego for Senate in 2024. Well, Arizona has another election for governor next year. Will you do us all a favor and run it back and run for governor again? I yield.
The gentlelady,
No more questions.
Can I respond
You may
to some of
respond.
that? Because that was complete insanity. I wish I could yield back the last 5 minutes of my life, actually. And I want to apologize to the people of Arizona that we have somebody who's representing the folks in one of our great parts of the valley that doesn't care about the integrity of our election. So but you weren't here, you came in late, and we're talking about USAGM today, the Agency for Global Media, and how they can put out absolute abject lies, and we can't control any, we have no say over what the editorial content is, and I would hope that you would not be okay with that. They could literally put out a lie about anybody here, and I know you've been the victim of that. I know you've been the victim. I remember the stories about you where they said you had a gay lover, and those were going out all
Mr.
over.
Chairman.
Can I
I
finish
hope
the
you
story?
honor what you just gave as a caution to everyone, and I moved those words
To tell you that those kind of lies, and you said those
rule
were
if you want.
lies, those kind of lies could be broadcast today on VOA, and you couldn't pick up the phone, Representative Stanton, and call them and say, hey, you're putting out lies about me. You would not be able to do that because they would sue you for breaking the firewall. So lies are being told on Voice of America. It's inappropriate. You've been subjected to lies that you said were lies about you in the media before. And how would you like it if those lies were put on Voice of America right now? Because they could do it, and you couldn't do a thing about it. You couldn't stop it. You couldn't stop all those lies that you said were said about you if they went on Voice of America today. You'd have to sit and take it.
Okay, I thank the gentlelady, and I appreciate the dialogue. Ruling on the member, she was responding, and I thought rather complimentary that in fact those were untrue, and she was defending that. So
That's what he says.
I'll leave it as that. If I think Mr. Stanton would agree that those were untrue statements, and she said so. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes.
Mr.
Yeah, I
Chairman.
apologize. I wasn't concerned at all what she was saying. My concern is that the leader of this agency, which is supposed to disseminate truth about the United States, is an adjudicated liar. That's not an exaggeration. That's not.
Okay, the gentleman made that point quite clearly.
Said that, and
Mr.
that's why I
Mr.
brought it up.
Chairman.
Recognizing myself for
Mr.
5
Chairman,
minutes.
unanimous consent.
Let me start by giving you some context about what Voice of America actually is, because the fake news media won't tell you the truth about this agency. Voice of America was created during World War II as a propaganda arm of the United States government. Now, when I say propaganda, I'm not using that as a dirty word. Every nation uses information warfare to advance their interests, and that's exactly what Voice of America was designed to do. The problem is that for decades, this agency has been infiltrated by deep state operatives who have been using American taxpayer dollars to spread globalist messaging instead of America First principles. Under the Obama administration, and even under previous Republican administrations, Voice of America became a tool for the Washington establishment to push their foreign policy agenda, which often put other countries' interests ahead of American interests. They were spending millions of our tax dollars to broadcast in dozens of languages to countries that frankly don't deserve our help, while American communities were suffering from lack of investment in infrastructure, education, and economic development. Now let's talk about what Kari Lake is trying to do and why the establishment is so terrified of her. Kari Lake is a true America First patriot who understands that every single government agency needs to be reformed to serve the American people first. When she talks about bringing Voice of America to statutory minimum staffing levels, she's talking about fiscal responsibility and accountability. She's talking about making sure that every dollar we spend on international broadcasting actually advances American interests, not the interests of foreign governments or globalist organizations. The so-called controversy about the Armenian language service is a perfect example of how the swamp tries to manipulate good-hearted Americans into supporting wasteful government spending. Representative Stanton comes in with this emotional appeal about Armenian people and Russian disinformation, trying to make it sound like Kari Lake is somehow betraying our allies. But let's look at the facts here. First of all, Armenia is not a NATO ally. Armenia is not even a reliable partner of the United States. For decades, Armenia has been playing both sides, taking money and support from Russia while also trying to get aid from the United States and European Union. Why should American taxpayers be subsidizing broadcasts to a country that can't even decide which side they're on in the global struggle between freedom and authoritarianism? Second, and this is crucial, Kari Lake explicitly stated that Armenian is not a statutorily required language service. That means Congress never actually mandated that we provide this service. It was just something that the bureaucrats at Voice of America decided to do on their own, probably to justify their bloated budgets and expanded staff. When Kari Lake talks about following the law and the statutory requirements, she's talking about accountability and transparency in government. Representative Stanton tries to make this about Russian disinformation, but that's just another deep state talking point. If Armenia wants to counter Russian disinformation, they can do it themselves. They can invest in their own media infrastructure. They can create their own independent journalism. Why should American taxpayers be paying for Armenia's media consumption when we have homeless veterans sleeping on the streets of American cities? And let's talk about the real elephant in the room here. Stanton brings up the Persian language service and tries to make it sound like Kari Lake made some kind of mistake by putting those employees on leave. But what actually happened? When tensions escalated between Israel and Iran, the administration recognized that Persian language broadcasting was strategically important for American interests in that region. So they brought those employees back. That's not a mistake, that's flexible and responsive management. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need in our government agencies. Instead of just spending money on every possible language service because it might be nice to have, Kari Lake is making hard decisions about where American resources can be most effectively deployed to advance American interests. When there's a crisis or strategic opportunity, you surge resources to that area. When the crisis passes, you redeploy those resources to where they're needed most. That's how you run an efficient and effective government agency. But here's what really gets me fired up about this whole exchange. Representative Stanton has the audacity to question Kari Lake about whether Russia is an adversary of the United States, as if she hasn't been fighting against foreign interference and globalist influence her entire political career. This is the same Kari Lake who has been warning about election integrity issues, who has been fighting against the deep state, who has been standing up for American sovereignty against globalist organizations. And when she brings up the fact that Voice of America has actually hired Russian spies in the past, Stanton just ignores it. He doesn't want to talk about the real security vulnerabilities in this agency. He doesn't want to address the fact that the previous leadership of Voice of America was so incompetent that they actually allowed foreign intelligence operatives to infiltrate their organization. Instead, he wants to grandstand about a handful of employees who were providing services that Congress never even required. This is typical swamp behavior. They create these bureaucratic empires with no clear mission, no accountability, and no connection to actual American interests. Then when a reformer like Kari Lake comes in and tries to impose some fiscal discipline and strategic focus, they act like she's destroying American foreign policy. It's complete nonsense. Let me tell you what real American foreign policy looks like. Real American foreign policy means using our resources strategically to advance American interests. It means building relationships with countries that are actually willing to be reliable allies and partners. It means not wasting taxpayer money on feel-good programs that make Washington bureaucrats feel important but don't actually make America safer or more prosperous. If Armenia wants to break free from Russian influence, that's great. We should support that through diplomatic channels, through trade relationships, through security cooperation if it serves our interests. But we don't need to be subsidizing their media consumption with American taxpayer dollars, especially when we have so many pressing needs here at home. And let's be honest about what's really going on here. The establishment politicians and bureaucrats are terrified that Kari Lake is going to expose just how much waste and corruption has been going on in these agencies for decades. They're afraid that she's going to ask hard questions about where the money has been going, who has been making the decisions, and whether any of these programs have actually advanced American interests. Representative Stanton's performance in this hearing is a perfect example of everything that's wrong with Washington. Instead of asking substantive questions about how to make Voice of America more effective at advancing American interests, he wants to play gotcha politics and make emotional appeals about specific ethnic groups. Instead of holding the previous leadership accountable for their failures, he wants to attack the reformer who is trying to fix the problems. This is why we need more fighters like Kari Lake in government. She's not there to make friends with the swamp creatures. She's not there to preserve the status quo. She's there to shake things up, to ask hard questions, to demand accountability, and to make sure that every government agency is serving the American people first. When Kari Lake talks about right-sizing the agency, she's talking about something that every private sector manager understands. You assess your mission, you identify your priorities, you allocate your resources accordingly, and you eliminate waste and redundancy. But in Washington, this kind of basic management competence is treated like it's some kind of radical extremism. The truth is that Voice of America and other international broadcasting services have been operating without clear strategic direction for years. They've been broadcasting in dozens of languages to hundreds of millions of people around the world, but nobody has been asking the fundamental questions. Are these broadcasts actually changing hearts and minds? Are they advancing American interests? Are they worth the cost? Are there more effective ways to achieve our strategic objectives? These are the questions that Kari Lake is asking, and these are the questions that the establishment doesn't want to answer. They want to keep the gravy train rolling, keep the bureaucrats employed, keep the contractors getting paid, regardless of whether any of this actually makes America safer or more prosperous. And let's talk about the timing of this hearing and these attacks on Kari Lake. This isn't happening in a vacuum. The deep state and the establishment politicians know that President Trump is serious about draining the swamp this time. They know that he's appointed fighters like Kari Lake who won't be intimidated by congressional grandstanding or media attacks. So they're trying to derail these appointments before these reformers can even get into office. This is the same playbook they used against other Trump appointees in the first administration. They create these manufactured controversies. They get their allies in the media to amplify the attacks. They hope to generate enough pressure to force the nominees to withdraw or to water down their reform agendas. But here's the difference this time. The American people are awake to these tactics. We've seen this movie before. We know that when the establishment politicians and the fake news media are attacking someone this viciously, it usually means that person is over the target. They're afraid of what Kari Lake might uncover. They're afraid of what reforms she might implement. They're afraid of what accountability she might demand. The questions that Representative Stanton should have been asking are questions about effectiveness and results. How many people are actually listening to these broadcasts? What evidence do we have that they're changing behavior or attitudes? How do we measure return on investment for these programs? What are our strategic objectives in different regions, and how do our broadcasting services support those objectives? Instead, he wants to play identity politics and make emotional appeals about specific ethnic communities. This is exactly the kind of thinking that has led to decades of failed foreign policy. Instead of making hard strategic choices based on American interests, Washington politicians want to try to be everything to everyone, to fund every possible program that might make some constituency happy. But that's not how successful organizations operate. Successful organizations make tough choices. They prioritize their resources. They focus on what they do best. They eliminate programs that aren't producing results. They hold their employees accountable for performance. These are basic management principles that somehow become controversial when applied to government agencies. Kari Lake understands these principles because she's worked in the private sector. She's run organizations where results matter, where accountability is expected, where waste gets eliminated quickly because it hurts the bottom line. She's bringing that same mindset to Voice of America, and the bureaucrats and politicians who have been coasting on taxpayer dollars for decades are terrified. The other thing that really stands out in this exchange is Representative Stanton's attempt to make this about Russian disinformation. This is classic misdirection. Instead of focusing on whether our international broadcasting services are actually effective at advancing American interests, he wants to make it about foreign threats. It's the same tactic that the deep state has been using for years to justify bloated budgets and failed programs. Yes, Russia engages in disinformation campaigns. So does China. So does Iran. So do lots of other countries. But the solution to foreign disinformation isn't necessarily to spend more American taxpayer money on broadcasting services that may or may not be effective. The solution is to have a clear strategy, to measure results, to focus our resources where they can have the biggest impact. If Armenian people want accurate information about what's happening in their region, they have access to the internet. They can read American news sources. They can access social media. They can communicate directly with American officials and organizations. The idea that they need a special taxpayer-funded broadcasting service in their language is a relic of the Cold War era when information was much more restricted. And let's be honest about Armenia's strategic importance to the United States. Armenia is a small, landlocked country in the Caucasus region. They have a population of less than 3 million people. They have limited natural resources. They have a complicated relationship with their neighbors. They are not a major trading partner of the United States. They are not a significant military ally. They are not a crucial partner in addressing major global challenges. That doesn't mean we should ignore Armenia or be hostile to Armenia. But it does mean that we should be realistic about how much American resources we should devote to Armenian-specific programs when we have limited resources and unlimited global challenges. Every dollar we spend on Armenian language broadcasting is a dollar we're not spending on more strategically important priorities. This is the kind of hard-headed strategic thinking that has been missing from American foreign policy for decades. We've been trying to be the world's social worker, spending money on every possible cause and constituency without asking whether these expenditures actually advance American interests. Meanwhile, countries like China have been making strategic investments that strengthen their position and weaken ours. Kari Lake's approach to Voice of America is exactly what we need throughout the federal government. Clear priorities, measurable objectives, accountability for results, elimination of waste and redundancy. Focus on what actually advances American interests rather than what makes Washington bureaucrats feel good about themselves. The attacks on Kari Lake are really attacks on the America First agenda. The establishment politicians and bureaucrats know that if reformers like her are successful in cleaning up agencies like Voice of America, it will expose just how much waste and corruption has been going on throughout the federal government. It will demonstrate that we can maintain American influence and advance American interests without funding every feel-good program that some lobbyist or interest group demands. This is why it's so important for patriots like you to stay engaged in this process. The swamp creatures are going to continue attacking America First appointees like Kari Lake. They're going to continue trying to preserve their bureaucratic empires and their wasteful spending programs. They're going to continue putting foreign interests ahead of American interests. But we can't let them win. We need to support reformers like Kari Lake who have the courage to ask hard questions and make tough decisions. We need to hold our elected representatives accountable when they engage in the kind of grandstanding nonsense that Representative Stanton displayed in this hearing. We need to demand that every government agency justify its existence and demonstrate its value to the American people. The choice is clear, patriots. We can continue down the path of bloated bureaucracies, wasteful spending, and failed foreign policy initiatives that put other countries' interests ahead of our own. Or we can support the America First agenda and leaders like Kari Lake who are willing to fight for real reform and real accountability. I know which side I'm on. I'm on the side of the American people who are tired of seeing their tax dollars wasted on programs that don't work. I'm on the side of strategic thinking and fiscal responsibility. I'm on the side of putting America first in every decision our government makes. That's why I'm asking you to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/AmericaFirst. We're going to continue bringing you the truth about these battles in Washington. We're going to continue exposing the swamp creatures who want to preserve the status quo. We're going to continue fighting for the America First agenda that will make our country safer, stronger, and more prosperous. The establishment politicians and their media allies are going to continue attacking patriots like Kari Lake. But we're not going to let them win. We're going to stand with the fighters who have the courage to drain the swamp and put America first. That's what this channel is all about, and that's what the America First movement is all about. Thanks for watching, patriots. Keep fighting the good fight. And remember America first always.